Lately, with what's been going on in the world, a lot of people have been talking about vaccines. When should we vaccinate? Should we not vaccinate? I know a lot of people that are personally anti vaxxers. So today I'm going to talk about when vaccines actually worked in history. Stick around and listen to more. Hey guys, I'm Daniel from Doldier Media, and today we're going to talk about 3 times that vaccines actually changed the course of human history. Now, vaccines are something that in recent times we've been looking at very critically and negatively. A lot of people have stopped believing in vaccines, and I want to talk about when vaccines actually helped humankind. One of the things I hear a lot of people say about vaccines is that they're no longer useful, that there's a lot of other things inside of them. And a lot of people are right. There's things that we should be mindful of, especially when we're putting it into our bodies. An example of this is insulin. For the longest time, insulin was actually made from pigs. Now, a person who keeps kosher or a halal is not allowed to have any pig inside of them. And imagine if a diabetic Jewish person or a Muslim has to put insulin, it's going to be a moral dilemma, a moral question. Is he allowed to? Is he not allowed to? Is she going to put the insulin in her? Because it's not kosher, it's not halal. So we should be mindful of the things we put in our bodies. Working in a hospital, we see that there is Jehovah's Witnesses, for example, who are not allowed to have any blood transfusions. And it becomes a huge ethical and moral dilemma. Do you save a person that just needs blood, but they're morally not allowed to have any, according to their ethical system? Bob Marley actually died because of this, because in Rastafarianism, he has the same limitations that a lot of other religions have as to what can and cannot happen with the body. What we put into our bodies is very important, and I'm not trying to negate anybody's stance about a company who's not being transparent in terms of what they put into their vaccines. But with that being said, there are a lot of times that vaccines actually helped humans. As a society, we would not have come to the place that we're at today had it not been for vaccines. And I'm going to make that point by bringing in 3 examples where vaccines actually changed the course of human history. There's a weird phenomenon that happens with humans. We tend to forget the stories of our past. We tend to forget what happened to our ancestors. Currently, in the century that we're in, there's not that many diseases, at least in the West, that affects children as much as diseases did in the past. And because of this, we have a tendency to forget about this. We have a tendency to just ignore the past and start formulating ideas based on what's around us right now. Here are 3 times that vaccines actually work. Example number 1, polio. Polio is something that we don't really see in the United States that much anymore. There's an interesting statistic about how many people died from polio in the past and how many people die from it today, or at least in modern times. Now we see that the vaccine is actually what's the cause of this statistic to change so drastically. So what is polio? Polio is a virus that affects the nervous system. I had a patient before that had polio when they were a kid, and they were on a ventilator most of their lives. They started off in an iron lung, and an iron lung is something that we used to use to ventilate patients who couldn't breathe on their own. What is polio? Polio is a virus that affects the nervous system. It's random as to what it affects. The higher up it goes, the more damage it could potentially do. The nerves that control our actual breathing are located around the neck. So if the polio virus gets up that high, then we no longer have the ability to breathe. Kids are very susceptible to getting polio. And during the early 1900s, many people would get polio and lose the ability to walk, lose the ability to breathe, and a lot of people would die from this. One of our past presidents, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, had polio as a kid, and to the day he died, he was on a wheelchair, and he would actually hide that from the people. It's pretty interesting. You could actually see pictures of him in a wheelchair, and that's all due to polio. Now, not many people were fortunate enough, and a lot of kids actually died as a result of getting polio. There's no cure to polio, so when somebody gets nervous tissue damage or muscle damage due to polio, it stays for the rest of their lives. And like I said, the severity depends on a random occurrence. There's nothing you can actually predict. Some people died from it, some people were on ventilators for the rest of their lives, and some people recovered and went back to normal after they had polio. So because there was no cure, the only thing we could do is prevent polio. And in the 1950s, we actually developed a vaccine. They got a weakened version of the actual virus, and started inserting it into people and saw that they no longer got polio after they got the virus. How that works is your body actually creates a defense system based on the actual virus. It takes a few weeks for your body to create these fighter cells that we know. I'm not going to get into the actual science behind it because it's a little complicated. But when you do get these antibodies and you do get the defense for polio, you no longer can contract the virus at a later time. So the polio virus vaccine is actually a weakened version that they give you. So they give you a little bit of the actual virus. The vaccine works so well that from 1950 till today, the numbers have drastically dropped in cases of deaths, and we almost do not see polio in the United States any longer. Polio is still a problem in places that don't have the vaccine, or it's not easily accessible. The polio vaccine itself worked. The polio vaccine changed the course of human history because we don't see it anymore. It's very evident that it worked. Vaccine number 2 is measles vaccine. Now, just like the polio vaccine, in order to get the measles vaccine, it's pretty much an inactive or weakened version of measles that the patient would get, and that ensures that they don't get it again. Once you get the measles vaccine, your body now has antibodies to fight the virus and you don't get it. Now, what is measles? Measles is something that we again don't see that much, but in recent years it's starting to come back. Now, what is measles? Measles is a virus that attacks the body kind of like polio, but instead of attacking a nervous system, it attacks your epithelial tissues in your bronchi and your throat, and from then you develop pustules and little pox all over your body. When you have these, not only is it irritating and can cause nerve damage and muscle damage, but the actual damage that happens to the lungs and to the throat can cause other complications like pneumonia, and we used to see a lot of cases of deaths from measles. Before the vaccine was introduced, we would see on average this many deaths a year. After the vaccine was introduced, and in today's time, we see this many deaths because of measles. Now, measles is something that a lot of people are saying, oh, it's kind of like chickenpox. It's better to go to a little measles party or a chickenpox party and get your kid sick. But do you really want your loved one going through this? Now, measles is the scariest for infants and for newborns. A lot of people don't understand that they don't have the defenses yet, and it's very contagious. So if somebody in the household gets measles, there's almost a 100% chance that that little baby will get measles too. And babies cannot fight against the virus. So there's a high chance they will probably die. Because measles has not been around for so long, a lot of people are kind of not taking measles seriously. The kids who are getting measles today are the ones who are not vaccinated from the measles virus. Measles is one of those things that is very deadly. It affects kids, and little kids suffer from it. And we were able to create a defense against it by getting an inactivated version of the virus, injecting a little bit of it into kids, and they develop an immune response to it, and now they're protected from measles. I will link up in the bottom a video explaining measles a little bit better and more in depth. It's pretty interesting. I'm also going to link up a few articles as to how measles affects the human body. I'm also going to link up an article about the vaccine itself. Number 3 is going to be smallpox. Now, smallpox is something very interesting because this used to kill nations. One of the earliest mentions we know about smallpox comes from the war between the Hittites and the Egyptians. When the Egyptian prisoners had smallpox, they actually introduced it into the Hittite armies, and it got up all the way to the king, and he got sick and died. Smallpox is something that's been attributed to killing many, many people. What is smallpox? Smallpox is like chickenpox, but a lot more deadly. Pox is pretty much a word that we use to describe pus that comes out of the body. Here's a picture of how smallpox looks like. Now, from smallpox, a lot of people would die due to complications related to pneumonia, related to heart complications. Smallpox would be very painful, and afterwards, if the people recovered, then it would leave scars. Now, what's cool about smallpox is that it's completely 100% eradicated. Due to the vaccine, there are no longer any cases of smallpox in the world. It is another example of when the vaccine actually worked. Smallpox is something that people were scared of, people didn't know what to do about it, and now it's not even something that phases us anymore. It's interesting how the smallpox vaccine actually came to be. There was a scientist with the last name Jenner. He noticed that there was a thing called cowpox at the time, which the people that worked in farms that dealt with cows would get these little pustules all over their body, and it would be from the cow's disease itself. And an observation he made was that if somebody had cowpox, that they would no longer get sick from smallpox. So he created a study on an actual 8-year-old boy. And what he did was he injected the 8-year-old boy with cowpox. The boy got sick. For 3 days he was sick. Then he recovered. And after he recovered, he put smallpox onto the boy and injected his skin, put lesions on him to see if he would actually get infected by smallpox. And it worked. He didn't get sick from smallpox. So that's how the vaccine actually started. The vaccine that he created overpowered the common practice of the time, which many people were actually putting the old pus on people to get them sick with it. The problem with that is that a lot of people actually got smallpox and died as a result. In China, there's stories about them getting the dried up pus and snorting a little bit of it so that they get the immunization for it. And a lot of people actually got the virus, got smallpox, and died as a result. So the cowpox thing that Jenner created, this vaccine, helped us fight against smallpox. And it worked so well that in the 1980s, there were no more cases of it. And to this day, we still do not see smallpox around anymore. Here's another example of how a vaccine helped change the course of human history. So I'm not trying to bash or offend anybody. This is not necessarily against or for vaccines. This is just 3 times that vaccines did work. I am interested and curious about what you have to say about this. Please comment down below if you agree or disagree. Let me know what your feelings are. Now, just because I mentioned 3 doesn't mean that that's all there is. There are many more vaccines that do work. I just picked these 3 because 2 of them are related to the respiratory system and one of them is eradicated completely, which is just, it's pretty interesting and amazing. Thank you guys for watching. If you like my content, hit that like button, subscribe to my channel. Stick around for more good videos.